Good afternoon, Alex.
Good afternoon, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me.
So great to have you. Thank you so much for being here, for saying yes to joining me on Michelle's Conversations That Matter. It's a really important topic we have to discuss today, COVID-related employment challenges that employers should consider and employees should know about. So I'm really thrilled to have you here, and I'm thrilled that Mitch introduced me to you and said you have to talk to this amazing attorney, Alix, and I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you a little bit over the course of the last few weeks.
Well, thank you. So just a little bit about who I am and what I do. I'm Alix Rubin. I founded Rubin Employment Law, get employers and employees to stop fighting so everyone can get back to business. That's always our goal, is to resolve the disputes either before they happen or very quickly and cost effectively for either the employer or the employee. So typically on the employer side, we put together policies, procedures, handbooks, and give advice. We will litigate if we have to. And on the employee side, we try to negotiate severance agreements, employment agreements. And again, if we have to litigate an issue that, the other side's not budging, well, then we go to court.
Got it. So there's a lot of areas of law. What had you gravitate to employment law?
Oh, wow. I feel that people spend so much of their time, the majority of their time, I'd say, 60 to 80% of their time, their lives at work, right? So it's such an important, part of people's lives. And look, I've been both. I've been an employee and now I'm an employer, and I understand the issues from both sides. And it's also an ever-changing practice area, and it's different and it's challenging.
Yeah, ever-changing, I think, is the key, especially now since we're living through COVID and the pandemic, and work as we know it has completely transformed for so many people. I'm really excited to dive into this. So you and I had a conversation before this live, and you were educating me and sharing with me some of the different aspects that you have gotten present to over the course of the last several months during COVID. And one of the things that you educated me on was this Families First Coronavirus Response Act. It's called the FCRA. So for our viewers here, could you educate us on what that is and what that would provide?
Absolutely. So what that does, it's a supplement to whatever your state laws are regarding sick leave and family leave, and federal law regarding family leave, family and medical leave. What it does is there are 6 different categories, 6 different reasons under which an employee could qualify for the benefits. And let's see if I can remember all 6. So it's actually pretty easy. It's if the individual employee either has COVID, that's 1, is subject to a government quarantine because of COVID, that's 2, or is advised by a healthcare provider to be under quarantine, that's 3. And when I say have COVID, means you suspect you have COVID and you're in the process of being diagnosed, being tested, you're waiting for your test results. So that also kind of falls in the quarantine category. So that's 3. 4 would be if the employee is caring for someone who has COVID, or 5 is under a quarantine order. And then 6 is like a broad catch-all for anything else related to a COVID, due to a COVID-related condition. What the benefits are, it's up to 80 hours or the equivalent of 2 weeks if it's a part-time employee of emergency sick leave. And then beyond that, only for the child care reason and only for employees who've been employed for at least 30 days, you get another 10 weeks of family leave to take care of your child whose school is closed, or school or daycare, or during the summertime, even camps qualified. So now the statute is due to expire December 31st of this year. We'll see if the lame duck Congress decides to extend it in January, because I think a vaccine will start becoming available, but it won't be readily distribute it. You know, they won't have the quantity to distribute to the general public. Probably they're predicting now that until the spring.
Right.
So yeah, so those are additional benefits. Oh, and it doesn't now. It's only employers 500 or less employees, and not healthcare. Healthcare workers don't qualify. First responders don't qualify. In fact, any business that supplies a healthcare business doesn't qualify as well.
Got it.
And yeah, but they are additional benefits due to COVID, and it's not out of the employer's pocket. It is, but it isn't. The employers get a dollar for dollar payroll tax credit for that.
Got it. I don't think a lot of people know about that. I don't know why. I just feel like I have not ever heard about this this act until you and I were chatting, and I'm like, I think people need to know about this. So they would just,
absolutely.
how would they go about you know, tapping into that? Is that something?
It's something they just need to ask their employers
about.
Yeah, I mean, employers, actually, there is a poster that employers are supposed to post in the workplace. Now, these days, if people are working remotely,
yeah,
but then they were supposed to email that to everybody, actually. That's a requirement. And again, it's look, if you're under quarantine, but you're not sick, you can still telework, then you don't qualify for it.
Right. Got it. Got it. Really interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
You had some recommendations for organizations. You know, I'm a big advocate for compassion and helping people have more compassion for one another. I do that through a lot of the work that I do. And, you know, I've been reading articles and talking to a lot of people about good leadership, strong leadership, what's necessary, especially in times of crisis like this pandemic. But when we spoke, you were talking about, you had some recommendations to organizations and to leaders of things they can be doing during COVID for their people. What are some of those things that you would recommend?
Yeah, certainly, Michelle. So, I mean, I think more so than ever, employers need to be, and supervisors need to be respectful and considerate to their employees. Everybody's going through a hard time right now, and changes, all these changes. And look, I can't believe it, but we're into our 9th month already of this, dealing with this, and many employees are still working remotely. Other businesses have opened up. Obviously, essential businesses have been open longer than others, but many employees are working remotely. It's harder to connect with people. So 2 things really. One is just check in with your employees. Like, there's nothing wrong with asking, how are you? Are you okay? How are you doing? And there doesn't have to be a reason for that. Like, no, your work is fine. Don't worry. I'm just checking in. Right? For supervisors to check in. I mean, they should be checking in anyway in terms of performance to make sure that employees are doing their jobs and getting the work done. But also be flexible. You know, if they can't do it during normal business hours and they're working remotely, and they don't have to be, you know, in the office or in the store, so to speak, you know, if they need to work at night instead of during the day or early in the morning, you know, and leave early, quote unquote, leave early, right? Log off early, then, you know, make those accommodations. And then, you know, make sure that they're aware that you have resources for them, right? If you have an employee assistance program, an EAP, if you have, you know, readily available, you know, mental health, you know, resources for your employees, make sure they know where to find them. Again, if they're not physically in the office, they're not going to see the posters that you have in your break room or lunchroom. You know, make sure you email employees periodically. Just a reminder, you know, these resources are available to you.
Got it. Yeah, that's really good. And even though I know now we're sort of in the midst of like this wave 2 in our state of New Jersey, but like I understand from some people that some organizations are opening their doors and they are wanting employees to return. Do you have any recommendations for employers that they can do to help with the return to work fears and concerns?
Yes, absolutely. Communication is key. Let your employees know what you're doing in the workplace to make it safe. There are now new requirements here in New Jersey that the governor issued an executive order that, you know, what offices need to do in terms of cleaning, in terms of, you know, having, masks available for every employee, and wearing of masks in terms of, keeping employees 6 feet apart. And you could stagger shifts. You could, have employees work at every other desk or every other cubicle, so they're not right on top of each other, because now they can't be. But make sure employees understand that you are taking all the possible precautions so that they don't get sick. And then, obviously having to report if somebody does get sick, and do all the contact tracing.
Yeah.
And again, and make sure, have employees get tested if someone in the office is sick or was exposed.
Right.
Actually now employees are required to do health assessments, and they're allowed to do that now. Some employers take temperatures, some don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, very common.
But again, some employees may feel like, oh, this is too intrusive. Well, it's for everybody's safety.
Right.
And now the governor ordered it. So
yeah. I, as an advocate for invisible disabilities, I always, this term that has always been present to me was around, and I'm going to just totally take advantage of the fact that I have you here and just see if you can explain it to me.
Okay.
What encompasses reasonable accommodations for someone? And it could be physical or invisible, visible or invisible disabilities. So like, what does that mean when an employer says that they're going to provide reasonable accommodations? What does that mean to you?
So what it means is making some adjustment to the job duties, in a way, or to the job itself and how the job gets done, in a way such that, irregardless of the employee's disability, whether it's visible or invisible, they can still get their job done. They can still do what are called under the law the essential functions of the job. And that's why I always go back to job descriptions. It's really important for employers to have job descriptions that list out what those essential functions are. Now, they could change over time, but if they change, make sure you have it documented and in writing. And then everybody knows these are the essential functions. You have to be able to do these tasks, get these things done. And if you can do this, if there's something we can change in the way you do it, can you do it from home? That's a reasonable accommodation. Another reasonable accommodation, which actually doesn't encompass getting those tasks done, would be a reasonable amount of leave time, right? If you need to recover, for example, from an illness, in this case, it would be COVID. And then again, we go back to the FCRA when you get that time paid, that paid time off anyway. But the important thing for companies to understand is it doesn't have to cost $1 gazillion. It doesn't, you're not required to make an accommodation. An accommodation is not reasonable, let me put it this way, if it's going to cost you $1 gazillion, right? It has to, the other piece of it is it cannot cause an undue burden to the company.
Okay.
And in terms of the cost, well, it's going to depend on what's considered an undue burden. It's really going to depend on the size of the company and what their revenues are, right? And what their profit margin is and how much cash they have, right? So, right now, I mean, look, obviously a reasonable accommodation for a restaurant is not for the person to work from home. That's not going to work unless it's the bookkeeper, right? Right. But it could be for a lot of offices.
Right. I think about what COVID has sort of in a positive light done for the workplace. There was a time when I worked in an organization where certain leaders were very regimented about seeing their staff every day, right? And when COVID came along, we had to learn how to work with one another and maintain that connection and that visibility. And it was okay to work remotely. So I'm excited for almost like the future of the work environment, because people are going to see that just because people are not physically in locations, that they can still be effective contributors and get their jobs done. So that's sort of like, I feel is like the silver lining to COVID is we're learning how to work differently and learning how to adjust.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm noticing there are quite a number of larger companies that I don't know that they're going to go back to everybody being in the office all the time anymore.
Right.
First of all, it'll save them money in terms of space that they have to buy or rent. in terms of, and everything else that goes along with running an office. If people can do a lot of their work from home and maybe just have people come in for meetings, maybe a couple times a week. Right now, everybody's having Zoom meetings, right? And that's
exactly.
That's working out. That was something else, actually, I forgot to mention about how employers can help their employees. A lot of people are feeling really isolated, right? They're not socializing like they used to because of COVID. They're not, either at work or outside of work. And particularly in terms of at work, I certainly wouldn't make it mandatory. I've seen things about that where no, it's not a good idea to make like a happy hour mandatory or a work-related social gathering, say on Zoom or another similar platform. Don't make it mandatory, but make it available. Like if people, because people are not hanging out, people are not having lunch together, people are not, meeting at the proverbial water cooler anymore. So do it by Zoom, and first see if there's if people want to do that, and if they do, then make that available.
Right. To connect and not talk about work, but to continuously be building those relationships. That's so critical for being effective in your role is the informal rapport that you build with people. Yeah,
absolutely. And even, well, now that the weather's getting colder, it'll be harder to do, but in the warmer weather, they could have, some companies were doing some outdoor things as well, socially distanced outdoor things. But the other thing is, look, it's teaching managers how to be better managers, right? How to, just because you're not physically there in the office with each other and you can't just walk by somebody's desk and see if they're doing their job, well, then have regular check-ins throughout the day, or at least beginning of the day, end of the day. Have stated goals for every day, every week, and make sure your employees are reporting in. And if they're not, check up on them. Maybe something's wrong.
Yeah, it's the ultimate in trust, in the experience of trust between employer and employee. Right? It's the ultimate. Either you have trust or you don't. Either you're working on building trust and more autonomy. I mean, like you have no choice because you're not physically together. Right. So this is like the perfect opportunity for that to be built or to be leveraged. Trust is everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then again, keep in mind, so many of your employees are parents, right? So many employees are parents and their kids. Well, kids have started going back to school now, but before but it's spotty and they may close the schools again. I mean, some kids are, parents are choosing not to send them back, and that's okay. But that means they need to devote some of their daytime hours to working with their children with their online learning. So again, that's where I say be flexible in terms of the hours and getting the work done and all the distractions. What if husband and wife are sharing an office, right? At home, a home office.
Yeah.
That can be problematic.
The other thing you mentioned in the pre-interview we were talking about, and I've seen this come up, people are mentioning it, is like when you work from home, the lines between work and home get blurred.
Yeah.
So like you mentioned something that people leaders need to recognize that employees could be overworking, the opposite side, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a friend who, she's a manager, and she happened to be online, not for work, but for, personal stuff. And she saw, because she was using the same computer, she saw that some of her staff were still working. And it was, after hours, it was 6 o'clock or later. And she yelled at them, right? She said, get off. You need to stop working, go be with your family. Go refresh, go do other things, and I'll see you in the morning. Yeah.
That's a good manager. That's a good.
And look, I mean, there's also a wage and hour concern when you're dealing with, hourly employees who are not exempt from overtime. You don't want them racking up the overtime, right? And you do, even though they're working from home, and you need a timekeeping system for working from home. You've got to pay them for whatever time they work, and but if it's not necessary, cut it off.
Yeah, because I think people forget about the long term. I mean, I get it. It's easy to be like, okay, let me just hop on my computer and do a few things after dinner, or I'm just going to work on this report tonight. But, you know, that's a slow road to burnout, right? And if you want your employees to be performing the best of their ability, you have to be encouraging those boundaries.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You and I were talking a little bit about 3 things that employers could do to remember and to do for their employees. And we actually have a slide here I'll share. You want to maybe talk people through this?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, as I said before, be vigilant, check on your employees, you know, make sure that they're okay. It's okay to ask, are you okay? You know, I'm just checking in. Nothing's wrong. I'm just checking in. I just want to make sure you're okay. How are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
How are you dealing with, you know, now that the rates are going back up? You know, are your kids still in school, or are you keeping them at home? How are you handling that situation? And again, be tolerant of all the distractions that they are going to have working from home. If they have children at home, if they have a spouse who's nearby, you know, in the house, and they can't separate their workspaces. If they have pets, right? Pets are actually sometimes often very, very helpful for well-being.
Yeah.
But it could also be a distraction. Well, I got to go walk the dog now. Be tolerant of, you know, them taking a walk midday. And coming back to work afterwards and making up the time. Make sure they know, and we said this before, that they know and are aware of their employee assistance program resources that you may have available for them, and phone numbers for mental health providers if you have that as well. And just reinforce that to staff, because they're not going to see that posted unless you email it to them.
Yeah.
And then finally, when if you are reopening the office or have reopened the office, make sure the staff knows what you're doing to keep the office safe for them. Demonstrate to them what, you know, exactly what you're doing, and it'll help calm their fears.
Awesome. So what else are you up to, Alix? And how do people get in touch with you if they want to just reach out to you and they're looking for some advice or some support around employment law and their situation?
You can certainly call us, and our phone number is at the bottom of the screen. You can, you know, go onto our website. Our contact information is there. You can email me. It's arubin, RUBIN, at alixrubinlaw.com. It's the same domain as my website. Yeah, reach out if you have questions, and we'll figure it out together.
Awesome. Before I let you go, what have you been seeing? I guess, like, without, obviously you want to protect your clients, but like, what's the most common thing you've been seeing that people are reaching out to you about? Is it around like returning to work? Is it around FFCRA? What are you seeing?
So back in, I want to say May, June, July, I was getting questions from employer clients about returning. You know, they were reopening their offices and returning to work. And even though, you know, this was before the governor issued his new latest executive order about all the protocols, but I was basically advising my clients and doing it myself, basically everything that the governor just ordered, in terms of what you need to put in place, and making sure that you have it in writing. And just like dealing with, you know, individual employee issues about coming back to work, and this employee is afraid to come back. What do I do? You know, how do I address that? And again, you want to just explore very gently. If an employee says he or she's afraid to come back to the office, why? Yeah. Do you have a condition that is? Want to be sure that if they have a condition, then the whole reasonable accommodation kicks in, and then you have to have what's called an interactive dialogue to determine, is there a reasonable accommodation for this employee? So those were some of the issues we were facing in the spring and summer. Now, more recently, I just had a situation with a client who's actually one of her employees came down with COVID. And she didn't know, like you said, she knew about FFCRA, but actually the employee thought she she thought she could get additional sick time,
Yeah.
sick leave as well. She didn't understand how it all worked, right? So we explained all that about, yes, you do have to pay the FFCRA emergency sick leave over and above her regular sick leave, which she had already exhausted. You can allow employees to use vacation time as well for that. And then unfortunately, actually everybody, and then of course all the protocols about, and she was pretty much aware of this, about contact tracing and making, informing the employees that someone had come down with it, that they may have been in contact with, and everybody in her office, a small office, got tested. Yeah. Fortunately, they all tested positive. So now they're all working remotely.
Wow.
Yeah, they're all quarantined. Some are sick, some are not so sick, but yeah. So that's coming back as the rates are going back up.
I know.
More issues about that.
Yeah.
And, I'm trying to think. Oh yes, one more situation that involved OSHA, where one of my clients got an OSHA complaint, so I helped them respond to that. Yeah, and they really did a thorough investigation. One of the employees complained that there were too many people in their waiting area. They do testing. They have publics come in to test various pharmaceutical and cosmetic products. And somebody complained about that. So they put new procedures in place. I mean, their procedures were pretty good to begin with. And then it was fine. OSHA left them alone. They responded very well.
I think that the one thing I take away from this conversation and the one that we had earlier was all around communication. Right. I think like that, and you are a stand for that everybody, get back to work and there be a smooth resolution. But I think I'm reminded of some leadership work I did that says everything can be resolved through communication. And I think if I was to summarize what you stand for, am I right in that good communication with employer and with employee is so critical right now?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Alix. I'm so honored that you gave me some of your time today, and you're sharing your wisdom with my audience. Thank you for all the work you're doing as well.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, and it's my pleasure.
Awesome. So reach out to Alix. You have her information if you need any help. Have a good day, Alix.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.